Sarah Martinez had always been proud of the small tattoo on her wrist. It was a simple design, 3 interlocking circles with strange symbols inside each one. She got it when she turned 18, choosing it from a flash sheet at a local tattoo parlor in downtown Phoenix. The artist, an older man with weathered hands and kind eyes, had paused when she pointed to the design. "You sure about this one, kid?" he had asked, his voice carrying a weight she didn't understand at the time. "It's got some history to it." Sarah had laughed it off. She was young and rebellious, fresh out of high school, and ready to make her mark on the world. The tattoo felt right, mysterious and beautiful. She paid her money and walked out with the fresh ink burning slightly under the protective bandage. For 12 years, the tattoo was nothing more than a conversation starter. Friends would ask about its meaning, and Sarah would shrug and say she liked the design. It never meant anything special to her beyond being a reminder of her independence and youth. Now at 30, Sarah worked as a logistics coordinator for a private security firm in Virginia. The job was routine, organizing supply chains, managing schedules, and coordinating with various military contractors. She wore long sleeves most days, so the tattoo rarely saw daylight. Her life was ordinary, predictable, and safe. Everything changed on a Tuesday morning in March when Commander James Reeves walked into her office. Sarah had been expecting him. Her supervisor had mentioned that a high-ranking military official would be reviewing their operations for a potential government contract. She had prepared the usual presentation materials and arranged the conference room. What she hadn't prepared for was the man himself. Commander Reeves was tall and imposing, with silver hair and sharp blue eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. He wore his dress uniform with the kind of precision that spoke of decades of military service. Sarah had dealt with plenty of military personnel in her job, but something about Commander Reeves felt different. There was an intensity to him that made the air in the room feel heavier. The meeting started normally enough. Sarah walked him through their logistics capabilities, showing charts and explaining their supply chain management. The commander listened intently, asking pointed questions about security protocols and personnel background checks. His questions were thorough, almost suspicious, as if he was looking for something specific. It was during the coffee break that everything changed. Sarah had rolled up her sleeves while gathering papers from the printer. The office was warm, and she wasn't thinking about anything except getting the documents organized for the second half of their meeting. She was focused on the task when she heard the commander's coffee cup hit the floor. She turned around to see him staring at her wrist, his face drained of all color. The coffee was spreading across the carpet, but he didn't seem to notice. His eyes were locked on her tattoo with an expression she couldn't read, part shock, part fear, and something else that looked almost like recognition. "Where did you get that?" His voice was barely above a whisper, but the command in it was unmistakable. Sarah looked down at her wrist, confused. "Get what?" "Oh, the tattoo?" She touched it self-consciously. "I got it years ago when I was 18. Why?" The commander stepped closer, his eyes never leaving the small design on her wrist. "Do you know what it means?" "No, not really. I just liked how it looked. Is there something wrong?" For a long moment, Commander Reeves said nothing. He seemed to be struggling with something internal, weighing options in his mind. Sarah could see the wheels turning behind his eyes, and it made her uncomfortable. The silence stretched until it became almost unbearable. Finally he spoke, but his voice had changed completely. Where before it had been professional and controlled, now it carried an urgency that made Sarah's stomach clench with sudden anxiety. "Miss Martinez, I need you to tell me everything about that tattoo. Where you got it, who gave it to you, what the artist looked like. Everything you can remember. I don't understand. What's this about?" The commander's jaw tightened. "That symbol. It's not just a random design. It's a mark. A very specific mark that was used by a classified military unit that officially never existed." Sarah felt the world tilt slightly. "What do you mean, never existed?" "I mean that only a handful of people in the entire world would recognize what's on your wrist. And most of them are dead." The weight of his words settled over the room like a heavy blanket. Sarah stared down at her tattoo. The 3 interlocking circles that had seemed so innocent for all these years. They looked different now, somehow darker and more complex than she remembered. "Commander, you're scaring me. What kind of unit are you talking about?" He was quiet again, studying her face as if trying to determine whether she was telling the truth about not knowing the tattoo's significance. Sarah could feel sweat beading on her forehead despite the air conditioning. The kind that dealt with problems the regular military couldn't handle, he said finally. The kind that operated in the shadows without oversight or acknowledgement. The kind that required absolute loyalty and complete discretion. Sarah's mind raced. She thought about the tattoo artist, his weathered face and the way he had hesitated when she chose the design. She thought about his words. It's got some history to it. I swear I didn't know, she said, her voice shaking slightly. I just picked it off the wall. It was just a tattoo to me. Commander Reeves studied her for another long moment, then seemed to come to some kind of decision. He pulled out his phone and started dialing a number. This meeting is over, he said without looking at her. And Miss Martinez? Don't leave town. We're going to need to talk again very soon. As he walked toward the door, still holding the phone to his ear, Sarah heard him speak quietly to whoever answered. We have a situation. I need a full background check, and I need it yesterday. And get me everything we have on Operation Blackwater. All of it. The door closed behind him with a soft click, leaving Sarah alone in the conference room with more questions than answers, and a growing certainty that her ordinary life was about to become anything but ordinary. Sarah couldn't sleep that night. She lay in her bed staring at the ceiling, her wrist burning as if the tattoo was fresh again. Every few minutes she would turn on the lamp and examine the 3 interlocking circles, trying to see what Commander Reeves had seen. But they looked the same as they always had, just ink under her skin. She had tried calling in sick to work, but her supervisor told her that wouldn't be possible. Government business, he had said in a tone that suggested the conversation was over. So there she was, sitting at her desk the next morning, jumping every time someone walked past her office. At exactly 9 o'clock, there was a knock on her door. Sarah's heart hammered as she called out for whoever it was to come in. But instead of Commander Reeves, a woman entered. She was tall and lean, with short blonde hair and the kind of posture that screamed military training. She wore civilian clothes, but they looked like a costume on her. Miss Martinez? I'm Agent Collins with the Defense Intelligence Agency. I need to speak with you about yesterday's meeting. Sarah's mouth went dry. Defense Intelligence Agency? I don't understand what's happening here. Agent Collins closed the door behind her and took the seat across from Sarah's desk without being invited. That's exactly what we're trying to figure out. Commander Reeves briefed me on your conversation yesterday. I need you to walk me through everything you remember about getting that tattoo. For the next hour, Sarah repeated everything she could remember about that day 12 years ago. The tattoo parlor was called Desert Rose Ink. It was on Roosevelt Street near downtown Phoenix. The artist was older, maybe in his 60s, with gray hair and a scar on his left hand. He had seemed to know the design, had even questioned her choice. Agent Collins took notes in a small black notebook, asking detailed questions about things Sarah had never thought to remember. What time of day was it? Were there other customers in the shop? Did the artist have any military decorations visible? Did he ask about her family or background? I need you to think carefully about this next question, Agent Collins said, her pen poised over the notebook. Did the artist charge you the normal price for the tattoo? Sarah paused, thinking back. Actually, no. I remember thinking it was cheap. I had saved up $200, but he only charged me $50. Said it was a special rate for first-time customers. Agent Collins wrote something down quickly. And you never went back to that shop? No, I left Phoenix right after graduation. Moved to Virginia for college and just stayed. Why would that matter? Instead of answering, Agent Collins pulled out her phone and made a quick call. We need a team in Phoenix checking records for Desert Rose Ink on Roosevelt Street. I want everything. Business licenses, tax records, customer lists if they exist, and run a check on the building's ownership history. She hung up and looked at Sarah with an expression that was hard to read. Miss Martinez, I'm going to share some information with you, and I need you to understand that this conversation is classified at the highest levels. You cannot discuss what I'm about to tell you with anyone. Sarah nodded, though she wasn't sure she had any choice in the matter. The symbol on your wrist was the identification mark for a covert operations unit called Task Force Blackwater. It operated from 1987 to 1999, handling high-risk missions that required complete deniability. The unit was dissolved after a mission in Eastern Europe went wrong. What kind of missions? The kind that officially never happened. Rescue operations in hostile territory, intelligence gathering, eliminating high-value targets. The members of Task Force Blackwater were among the most highly trained special operations soldiers in the world. Sarah felt sick. And you think the man who gave me this tattoo was one of them? We think he was more than that. We think he might have been the unit's leader, Colonel Marcus Webb. Colonel Webb disappeared in 1999, right after the unit was disbanded. He was wanted for questioning about missing classified materials and unauthorized operations. The room felt like it was spinning. But why would he give me this tattoo? I was just some random teenager. Agent Collins leaned forward. That's what we need to figure out. Because according to our records, there were only 12 people who ever received that mark. 11 of them are dead. The 12th was Colonel Webb himself. So either he's dead too, or he gave you his mark for a reason we don't understand yet. Sarah's phone rang, making both women jump. She looked at the caller ID and frowned. It's a Phoenix number. I don't know anyone in Phoenix anymore. Answer it, Agent Collins said, pulling out what looked like a small recording device. Put it on speaker. Sarah's hand shook as she answered the call. Hello? Sarah Martinez. The voice was older, gravelly, and somehow familiar. Yes, this is Sarah. You probably don't remember me, child, but I remember you. And I know someone came asking questions about your ink. Sarah's eyes widened. She mouthed "It's him" to Agent Collins, who was frantically signaling to keep him talking. I'm sorry, who is this? The man who gave you something that wasn't mine to give. And now it's time for you to understand what it means. Agent Collins was typing rapidly on her phone, probably trying to trace the call. I don't understand, Sarah said. You will, but not over the phone and not with company listening. Sarah, honey, you're in danger. More danger than you know. That mark on your wrist makes you a target for people who would kill you just for wearing it. What are you talking about? Meet me tonight, midnight. The old railway bridge over Potomac Creek. Come alone or don't come at all. And Sarah, yes, trust no one. Not the government, not the military, not even the people sitting in your office right now. They all want what you have, but they don't understand what they're dealing with. The line went dead. Agent Collins immediately started making calls. Her voice urgent as she spoke to various people about tracing the number and setting up surveillance. But Sarah wasn't listening. She was thinking about the voice on the phone, about how familiar it had sounded, and about the growing certainty that her life had just become something out of a spy movie. You're not actually considering meeting him, are you? Agent Collins asked when she finished her calls. Sarah looked at her tattoo again, and for the first time in 12 years, she felt like it was looking back at her. I don't know, she said honestly. But I think I need answers more than I need safety right now. Agent Collins's expression hardened. Miss Martinez, this isn't a game. Colonel Webb is a dangerous man who's been on the run for over 20 years. If he wants to meet with you, it's not for your benefit. Then why did he warn me about you? The question hung in the air between them like a challenge. Agent Collins opened her mouth to respond, then closed it again. For the first time since she had entered the office, she looked uncertain. We're trying to protect you, she said finally. From what? From making a mistake that could get you killed. Sarah stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the parking lot where she could now see several black SUVs that definitely hadn't been there that morning. I think, she said quietly, that mistake might have already been made. Sarah spent the rest of the day under what Agent Collins politely called protective observation. 2 agents in dark suits sat in her office, typing on laptops and speaking in hushed tones into their phones. Every time she tried to leave, even for the bathroom, one of them accompanied her. By 5 o'clock, Sarah felt like a prisoner in her own workplace. Her co-workers kept walking by her office, clearly curious about the federal agents, but too intimidated to ask questions. Her supervisor had stopped by once, looking nervous, and mentioned something about taking a few days off once the situation was resolved. What situation? Sarah had asked, but he had just shaken his head and left. As evening approached, Agent Collins returned with a briefcase full of documents and a grim expression. We found the tattoo parlor, she announced, setting the briefcase on Sarah's desk. Desert Rose Inc. closed down in 2011. The building is now a convenience store. What about records? That's where it gets interesting. According to city records, the shop was owned by a man named Marcus Williams. But Marcus Williams died in a car accident in Ohio in 1987. The same year Task Force Blackwater was formed. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. So Colonel Webb was using a dead man's identity. It looks that way. But here's what's really strange. Agent Collins opened the briefcase and pulled out several photographs. We found these in a storage unit that was rented under the Marcus Williams name. The rent has been paid automatically from a bank account for the last 14 years. The photographs were surveillance photos, grainy but clear enough to make Sarah's blood run cold. They showed her, not recent pictures but photos from her college years, her first job, her apartment. There were dozens of them spanning over a decade. "He's been watching me," Sarah whispered. "It appears so, and not just casually. This is professional-grade surveillance. Someone with serious resources has been keeping track of your life." Agent Collins laid out more photographs. These were older, showing a tall man with gray hair and a scar on his left hand. Even in the blurry surveillance photos, Sarah recognized him immediately as the tattoo artist. "That's him. That's the man who gave me the tattoo. Colonel Marcus Webb, age 73 if he's still alive. Former Green Beret, former Delta Force, former leader of Task Force Blackwater, also former CIA operative, though that part of his record is heavily classified." Sarah stared at the photos, trying to understand. But why? Why would he watch me for all these years? What could he possibly want with me? Agent Collins pulled out one more document, this one looking official and heavily redacted. "We think it has to do with this. It's a partial mission report from Task Force Blackwater's last operation. Most of it is blacked out, but we can see that it involved something called Package Romeo and took place in Romania in late 1999. What does that have to do with me? We don't know yet, but the timeline is interesting. Colonel Webb disappeared in December 1999, right after this mission. And according to the records we found, he first started surveillance on your family in January 2000. My family? Sarah felt her heart skip a beat. What surveillance on my family? Agent Collins hesitated, then pulled out another file. Your parents, Mr. and Mrs. Martinez. The surveillance started with them, then shifted to you when you turned 18 and got the tattoo. Sarah's hands were shaking now. Are my parents in danger? Do I need to call them? We've already taken precautions. They're safe, but they're also confused. Apparently they've never heard of Marcus Webb or Desert Rose Inc. or any tattoo parlor in Phoenix. What do you mean? I lived with them until I was 18. According to your parents, you got that tattoo during a weekend trip to Los Angeles with friends. They said you came home with it already done, and when they asked about it, you said you got it at some shop on Sunset Boulevard. The room seemed to tilt around Sarah. That's not right. I remember Phoenix. I remember the shop, the artist, everything. Memory can be tricky, especially when we're young, or when someone wants us to remember things a certain way. The implication hit Sarah like a physical blow. You think he messed with my memory? How is that even possible? There are techniques. Drugs, hypnosis, psychological manipulation. Task Force Blackwater was trained in all of them. Sarah stood up abruptly, her chair rolling back against the wall. This is insane. You're telling me that my entire memory of getting this tattoo is false? That some rogue military operative has been watching me for 20 years? And that my own parents don't even remember the truth about where I got it? We're still investigating. No. Sarah's voice was stronger now, fueled by anger and fear. I want answers, and I want them tonight. I'm going to that bridge. Agent Collins and the two other agents immediately stood up. Miss Martinez, we cannot allow that. It's too dangerous. You can't allow it? Who are you to allow or not allow anything? I'm a free citizen and I can go wherever I want. Not when there's a credible threat to your life. Sarah looked around the room at the three federal agents, all of them watching her with expressions that were more predatory than protective. For the first time, she really understood what the voice on the phone had meant about trusting no one. Then I guess you'll have to arrest me, she said, sitting back down and crossing her arms. The agents exchanged glances. Agent Collins spoke quietly into her phone for a moment, then hung up and turned back to Sarah. We're not going to arrest you, but we are going to escort you home, and we're going to maintain surveillance for your protection. Like you protected me from Colonel Webb for the last 12 years? It was a low blow, but it hit home. Agent Collins's jaw tightened. We didn't know about the surveillance until today. Right, so what else don't you know? At 11:30 that night, Sarah was sitting in her living room with two agents posted outside her apartment and one in the hallway. They had searched her apartment thoroughly, looking for what they called potential security threats, but she suspected they were really looking for anything that might connect her to Colonel Webb. They hadn't found anything. because there wasn't anything to find. At least not anything she was aware of. But as midnight approached, Sarah found herself thinking about the voice on the phone, about the familiarity of it and the genuine concern she had heard, about the surveillance photos that showed someone had been watching over her for years, but never approaching, never threatening. At 11:45, she made her decision. She went to her bedroom and opened the window that led to the fire escape. The agents were watching the front door and the hallway, but apparently they hadn't thought about the fire escape. Sarah climbed out into the cold night air, her heart pounding. She had never done anything like this in her life, but then again she had never been in a situation like this before. As she climbed down the metal stairs, she looked at her tattoo one more time. In the moonlight, the 3 interlocking circles seemed to shimmer slightly as if they were alive. For the first time in 12 years, Sarah wondered if there was more to her tattoo than just ink, and she was about to find out exactly what that meant. The drive to Potomac Creek took 40 minutes through dark, winding roads that Sarah had never traveled before. She had borrowed her neighbor's car, leaving her own in the apartment parking lot where the surveillance team would expect it. Her hands gripped the steering wheel tightly as she navigated by GPS, her heart hammering with each mile. The railway bridge was old and abandoned, stretching across a narrow section of the creek, surrounded by dense woods. Sarah parked on a gravel road about half a mile away and walked the rest of the distance, using her phone's flashlight to navigate the overgrown path. Every sound in the woods made her jump. The hoot of an owl, the rustle of leaves, the distant splash of something in the water. She reached the bridge at exactly midnight. It was a massive iron structure, probably built in the 1940s, with railroad tracks that looked like they hadn't seen a train in decades. The moon provided enough light to see the bridge clearly, but the shadows underneath it were deep and impenetrable. Sarah. The voice came from behind her, and she spun around to see a figure emerging from the tree line. Even in the dim light, she recognized him immediately. He was older now, his hair completely white and his face more lined, but the scar on his left hand was unmistakable. Colonel Webb? Just Marcus now. I haven't been a colonel for a very long time. He walked slowly toward her, his hands visible and empty. Thank you for coming. Are you going to tell me the truth? Because I've had enough lies for one day. Marcus studied her face in the moonlight. The truth is complicated, child, and some of it might be hard to hear. Try me. He was quiet for a long moment, looking out over the dark water. Your parents aren't your biological parents, Sarah. You were adopted when you were 3 years old, and your adoption records were sealed and classified. Sarah felt the world shift beneath her feet. What are you talking about? Your real father was Captain David Romano, my second in command in Task Force Blackwater. Your mother was Dr. Elena Romano, a physicist who worked on classified defense projects. They were both killed in Romania in 1999 during our last mission. That's impossible. I remember my childhood. I remember my parents. You remember the life that was carefully constructed for you. The Martinez family was chosen specifically to raise you because they desperately wanted a child and could be trusted to keep secrets. The memories of your life before age 3 were suppressed and new ones were gradually introduced. Sarah sank onto a concrete barrier beside the bridge. Why? Why would anyone do that? Marcus sat down beside her, maintaining a careful distance. Because your real parents died protecting something that could change the balance of power in the world. And because that something is hidden in the one place no one would think to look. Where? In your tattoo. Sarah looked down at her wrist, the 3 interlocking circles that had seemed so innocent for so many years. I don't understand. The ink isn't just ink, Sarah. It contains microscopic data storage devices so small they're invisible to the naked eye. Your father and I developed the technology in case we ever needed to hide critical information where our enemies couldn't find it. What kind of information? The location of something called the Kronos Archive. It's a database containing the real names and locations of deep cover intelligence operatives from dozens of countries. Think of it as the ultimate blackmail material. Enough to topple governments and destroy international intelligence networks. Sarah's mind reeled. And this is in my tattoo? The access codes are. The actual archive is hidden somewhere else, but without those codes it's just encrypted gibberish. Your father uploaded the codes into the ink before he died, and I was supposed to extract them and deliver them to our superiors. But you didn't. Marcus shook his head. By the time I got to you, I realized that everyone involved in the operation was being eliminated. Our own government was cleaning house, killing anyone who knew about Kronos. I couldn't let them kill a 3-year-old child for something her father did, so you hid me. I arranged for your adoption and created a new identity for you. Then I disappeared and have been watching over you ever since, making sure no one else figured out who you really are." Sarah stood up and paced to the edge of the bridge, looking down at the dark water below. "This is insane. You're telling me I'm some kind of walking data storage device? I'm telling you that you're the key to the most dangerous secret in the modern intelligence world. And now that Commander Reeves has recognized your tattoo, that secret is in danger of being exposed. Commander Reeves works for the same people who killed my parents? Commander Reeves works for people who think they're the good guys. But in the intelligence world, there are no good guys, Sarah. There are just people with different agendas." A sound in the distance made both of them freeze. It was the low rumble of vehicles on the gravel road Sarah had used to reach the bridge. "They found us," Marcus said, standing up quickly. "We need to go now." "Wait. If what you're saying is true, why didn't you extract the codes years ago? Why leave them in my tattoo all this time?" Marcus paused, his face grim in the moonlight. "Because extracting them would kill you. The process that embeds data in living tissue is irreversible. Remove the data and the tissue dies. In this case, that would mean a massive stroke that would leave you brain dead." The vehicle sounds were getting closer. Sarah could see lights flickering through the trees. "So I can never get rid of this, not without dying. Which is why we need to find another solution, and fast." Suddenly, spotlights blazed to life all around the bridge. Sarah was blinded for a moment, but she could hear vehicles approaching from multiple directions and the sound of helicopter blades overhead. Colonel Marcus Webb, Agent Collins's voice echoed through a megaphone. "Step away from the civilian and surrender yourself." Marcus grabbed Sarah's arm gently but firmly. "There's something else you need to know. The tattoo isn't just storage, it's also a tracking device. The government has been able to monitor your location for years through satellites designed to detect the specific electromagnetic signature of the ink." "What?" Sarah pulled her arm back. "You mean they always knew where I was?" "They knew where you were, but they didn't know what you were carrying until Commander Reeves recognized the symbol. Now they know, and they'll do anything to get those codes." The spotlights were getting brighter, and Sarah could hear boots on gravel as armed agents surrounded their position. "What do we do?" she whispered. Marcus looked at her with an expression that was both sad and determined. "We run, and we find a way to keep you alive while we figure out how to destroy the Kronos archive for good. Can we do that?" "I don't know, child. But your parents died trying to keep that information out of the wrong hands. I think we owe it to them to finish what they started." The first agents appeared at the end of the bridge, their weapons drawn and pointed in their direction. "This is your last warning." Agent Collins's voice was closer now. "Surrender now and no one gets hurt." Marcus looked at Sarah one more time. "Do you trust me?" Sarah looked at the 3 circles on her wrist, thinking about everything he had told her, about the parents she didn't remember, and about the life that had been built around a lie. "I don't know," she said honestly, "but I trust them even less." "Good enough," Marcus said, and before Sarah could react, he had grabbed her hand and jumped off the bridge into the dark water below. The water was shockingly cold and deeper than Sarah had expected. She fought her way to the surface, gasping for air, her clothes heavy and pulling her down. Marcus surfaced beside her, already swimming toward the far shore with strong practice strokes. "This way," he whispered urgently. "Stay low and keep quiet." Above them, she could hear shouting and the sounds of agents rappelling down from the bridge. Flashlight beams swept across the water, but Marcus guided her along the muddy bank where the shadows were darkest. They moved slowly, fighting the current until they reached a drainage pipe that led under a road. "In here," Marcus said, pulling her into the concrete tunnel. They crawled through the pipe for what felt like forever, emerging into a wooded area on the other side of the road. Marcus seemed to know exactly where he was going, leading her through the trees to a small cabin hidden behind a screen of pine trees. "Safe house?" Sarah asked, shivering in her wet clothes. "One of many. I've been preparing for this day for 20 years. Inside the cabin, Marcus handed her dry clothes and a towel while he started a small fire in the fireplace. The place was sparse but functional, with supplies clearly stocked for emergencies. Sarah changed quickly, grateful for the warmth, then sat on a wooden chair near the fire. "Now what?" she asked. Marcus was at a computer in the corner, his fingers flying over the keyboard. Now we do something that should have been done 20 years ago. We destroy the Chronos archive. But you said the codes are in my tattoo. How can we access them without killing me? There might be a way. Your father was brilliant. He built redundancies into everything he created. Before he embedded the codes in your tattoo, he created a backup copy on a quantum storage device. If I can find that device, we might be able to access the archive without touching your tattoo. Sarah watched him work, still trying to process everything that had happened. Where would this device be? Hidden somewhere your father thought would be safe. Somewhere connected to you, but not obvious to anyone hunting for it. Marcus pulled up files on the computer. Maps, photographs, documents that looked like intelligence reports. Sarah recognized some of the locations from her own life. Her college campus, her apartment building, her workplace. He's been watching me to protect me, she said, understanding dawning, but also to watch for signs that I might lead him to this backup device. Smart girl. Your father always said you had his mind for puzzles, but I don't remember him. Marcus paused his typing and looked at her. You were only 3 when they died, but you were already showing signs of exceptional intelligence. Your father used to say you would solve problems that stumped adults. A memory stirred in Sarah's mind, not a visual memory, but an emotional one. A feeling of safety, of strong arms lifting her up, of a voice singing lullabies in a language she didn't recognize. He spoke Romanian to me, she said suddenly. Yes, your mother was American, but your father was born in Bucharest.
How do you remember that?
I don't remember it exactly, but sometimes when I'm stressed or scared, I find myself humming a tune I don't recognize. And I've always been drawn to Romanian folk art without knowing why. Marcus turned back to the computer with renewed energy. Romanian folk art, that's it. Your father collected Romanian artifacts. Pottery, textiles, jewelry. He had a particular piece he was very attached to, a traditional bracelet that belonged to his grandmother. Where is it now? According to the records from your adoption, personal effects belonging to your birth parents were placed in a safety deposit box, to be given to you when you turned 25. Sarah's heart sank. I turned 30 last month. I never got anything from a safety deposit box, because the Martinez family was told there were no personal effects. But I know better. Your father would have made sure something survived, some way for you to access your heritage when you were old enough to understand. Marcus typed rapidly, accessing what looked like banking records. Here. A safety deposit box at First National Bank in Richmond registered under the name Elena Martinez Romano. Your birth mother's name combined with your adoptive mother's name. How do we access it? You're the beneficiary. All you need is ID and proof that you're 25 or older. Sarah stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the dark woods. In the distance, she could see the faint glow of searchlights still looking for them. Marcus, what if we're wrong? What if there's no backup device and the only way to get the codes is from my tattoo? Then we find another way. What other way? Marcus was quiet for a long moment. There is one option. The tattoo technology was designed to be transferable. If we could find another volunteer, someone willing to receive a copy of the coded tattoo, we could theoretically transfer the data without destroying it. But that would put someone else in danger. Yes, it would, which is why we're going to find that backup device first. A sound outside made them both freeze. It was the soft crunch of footsteps on fallen leaves. Moving carefully, but not carefully enough. Marcus immediately shut down the computer and grabbed a backpack from a closet. Back door, he whispered. Move fast, but stay quiet. They slipped out of the cabin just as flashlight beams appeared through the front windows. Sarah could hear voices, Agent Collins and at least 2 others. They had found the safe house. Marcus led her through the woods to an old pickup truck hidden under a camouflage tarp. They drove with the headlights off until they reached a main road, then switched them on and blended into the sparse late-night traffic. Richmond is 2 hours away, Marcus said. We'll get to the bank first thing in the morning. What if it's a trap? What if they're watching the bank? They might be, but we're running out of options and we're running out of time. What do you mean? Marcus's face was grim in the dashboard light. I intercepted some communications while you were changing clothes. The agency has authorized a termination order. Sarah's blood ran cold. Termination order? They've decided that the risk of the Chronos codes falling into enemy hands is too great. They're going to kill you and extract the data from your tattoo during the autopsy. Can they do that? The data would survive for a few hours after your death, long enough for them to extract it. Sarah stared out at the dark highway, processing the fact that her own government had just ordered her death. How long do we have? Maybe 12 hours. Maybe less. She looked down at her tattoo. The 3 interlocking circles that had cost her parents their lives and now threatened to cost her hers. Marcus, if we find this backup device, and if we manage to destroy the Kronos archive, what happens to me then? You get your life back. You get to be Sarah Martinez, ordinary citizen with nothing more dangerous than a pretty tattoo on your wrist. And if we don't? Marcus was quiet for several miles. Finally he spoke, his voice heavy with regret. Then I'll have failed your parents twice. Once when they died and once when I couldn't keep you safe. Sarah reached over and touched his shoulder gently. You've kept me safe for 20 years. Whatever happens now, that's not a failure. As they drove through the night toward Richmond and toward answers that might save or destroy her, Sarah found herself thinking about the parents she didn't remember, but who had loved her enough to hide the world's most dangerous secret in her skin. She was about to meet their legacy, and she wasn't sure she was ready for what she might find. First National Bank in Richmond opened at 9 o'clock sharp. Sarah and Marcus had spent the night in a 24-hour diner, drinking coffee and watching the news for any mention of a manhunt. There wasn't any, which Marcus said was more concerning than reassuring. When the government really wants someone, they don't advertise it, he had explained. Now they sat in Marcus's truck across the street from the bank watching for signs of surveillance. The morning rush hour provided good cover, with plenty of people coming and going. But Sarah's heart was hammering as she scanned each face for signs of federal agents. I don't see anything obvious, Marcus said, but that doesn't mean they're not here. What's the plan? You go in alone. I'll watch from here and create a distraction if anything goes wrong. Sarah took a deep breath. What kind of distraction? Marcus patted a duffel bag in the back seat. The kind that will give you time to run. At 9:15, Sarah walked into the bank with her driver's license and birth certificate. The safety deposit box area was in the basement, accessible through a secure elevator that required bank employee escort. The clerk, a middle-aged woman named Mrs. Patterson, was friendly and efficient. Elena Martinez Romano, she read from Sarah's documentation. Box 247. You know, we've had this box for quite a while. Let me just verify the signature on file. Mrs. Patterson compared Sarah's ID signature to a card in the file. Perfect match. Right this way. The basement was quiet and windowless, lined with rows of metal boxes. Box 247 was in the middle of a wall about chest height. Mrs. Patterson used her key, then handed Sarah a second key. Both keys are required, she explained. I'll leave you to your privacy. Just ring the bell when you're finished. Sarah's hands shook as she inserted her key and turned it alongside the bank's key. The box slid out smoothly, heavier than she had expected. Inside was a velvet bag and a sealed envelope with, for Sarah when she is old enough to understand, written in careful handwriting. She opened the envelope first. Inside was a letter written in the same handwriting, along with a small photograph of a man and woman holding a dark-haired toddler. Even without the resemblance, Sarah knew immediately that she was looking at her birth parents. The letter was brief, but heartbreaking. My dearest Sarah, if you are reading this, it means that Marcus succeeded in keeping you safe. And it means that we are no longer with you. We hope you have had a good life, full of love and happiness. We hope you never needed to know about the burden we placed on you. But if you are here, it means that burden has become dangerous. In the bag, you will find your father's most precious possession, a bracelet that belonged to his grandmother, who survived the siege of Bucharest in World War II. She always said it would protect the family's most important secrets. Your father hoped it would protect ours. We love you more than words can express. Be brave, be smart, and remember that sometimes the greatest act of courage is knowing when to let go. With all our love, Elena and David Romano. Sarah wiped tears from her eyes and opened the velvet bag. Inside was an intricate silver bracelet, clearly very old, with 3 circular medallions connected by delicate chains. Each medallion bore symbols that looked familiar. They were variations of the symbols in her tattoo. As she lifted the bracelet, she felt something shift inside one of the medallions. She examined it more closely and realized that the center medallion was actually a tiny container, sealed but designed to be opened. With trembling fingers, she twisted the medallion until it separated into 2 halves. Inside was a device no bigger than a grain of rice, looking like a miniature computer chip. "The backup," she whispered. Suddenly, the lights in the basement went out. Emergency lighting kicked in a moment later, casting eerie shadows across the walls. Sarah could hear commotion upstairs, shouting, the sound of doors slamming. Car alarms going off, Marcus's distraction. Sarah quickly put the bracelet on her wrist, closed the safety deposit box, and headed for the stairs. The elevator was out of service due to the power outage. When she reached the main floor, she found chaos. Bank employees were evacuating customers through the back exit, and she could hear sirens approaching from multiple directions. "Gas leak in the building next door," one of the employees explained as he guided people toward the exit. "We need to evacuate as a precaution." Sarah followed the crowd out the back door, then circled around to find Marcus. The truck was gone, but he had said he would pick her up at the parking garage 2 blocks away if they were separated. She was halfway to the garage when she heard her name being called. She turned to see Agent Collins approaching with 2 other agents, their hands near their weapons. "Miss Martinez, we need you to come with us immediately." "I don't think so," Sarah said, backing away. "The evacuation was cover for us to apprehend you safely. You're in serious danger and we're here to help. Help me or help yourselves to what's in my tattoo." Agent Collins's expression hardened. "We know about the Chronos codes. We also know that foreign intelligence agencies are closing in on your location. If they get to you first, those codes could be used to destroy American intelligence operations worldwide. And if you get them, they'll be used to do the same thing to other countries. Miss Martinez, this isn't a game. There are Russian and Chinese operatives in this city right now looking for you. If they find you, they won't hesitate to torture you for information." Sarah kept backing away, her hand instinctively moving to the bracelet on her wrist. The tiny data storage device felt warm against her skin. "How do I know you're telling the truth?" "Because they're here," Agent Collins said, pointing behind Sarah. Sarah turned to see 3 men in dark coats walking toward them from the other direction. They moved with the same predatory precision as the federal agents, but something about them felt different, more dangerous. "Russian SVR," Agent Collins said quietly. "They've been tracking satellite data trying to locate you." The 3 men were close enough now that Sarah could see their faces. Cold eyes, professional smiles, hands reaching inside their coats. "Miss Martinez," one of them called out in accented English. "We would like to speak with you." Sarah found herself trapped between 2 groups of people who all claimed they wanted to help her, and none of whom she trusted. She looked at her tattoo, then at the bracelet, and made a decision that surprised even her. "Actually," she called out loudly enough for everyone to hear, "I'd like to speak with all of you." At the same time, both groups paused, uncertain. "I have something you all want," Sarah continued, holding up her wrist so the tattoo was visible. "And I'm tired of running. So here's what's going to happen. You're all going to back away and give me some space, and I'm going to tell you exactly what I plan to do with the Chronos codes." Agent Collins stepped forward. "Miss Martinez, this isn't advisable." "The codes are in my tattoo," Sarah interrupted. "But they're also backed up on this device." She held up the bracelet so they could see the tiny chip in the medallion. "Which means I have options," the Russian operative spoke up. "You have information that belongs to the world, not to any single nation." "Actually," Sarah said, "I have information that belongs to my parents who died protecting it, and I'm going to honor their sacrifice." She pulled the tiny device from the bracelet and held it up. "This contains the backup codes. My tattoo contains the originals. Together they can access the Chronos archive. Separately, they're useless. What are you proposing?" Agent Collins asked. Sarah looked at the device in her hand, thinking about her parents' letter, about Marcus's 20 years of sacrifice, and about the choice between being a victim and being in control of her own destiny. "I'm proposing that we destroy both copies, right here, right now. The archive dies with the codes, and no one gets to use that information to hurt anyone else." She placed the device on the concrete and raised her foot over it. "The problem is," she continued, looking at her tattoo, "destroying the codes in my tattoo will kill me. So I guess the question is, how far are each of you willing to go to stop me?" The standoff stretched for several tense seconds. Then Sarah heard the sound of a truck engine approaching fast. Marcus's pickup truck roared around the corner, and she could see him behind the wheel, his face grim with determination. "Sarah," he called out. "Get in!" But instead of running toward the truck, Sarah looked at all the people who wanted to control her life and made her final choice. "I choose none of you," she said, and crushed the device under her heel. As the backup codes crumbled into useless fragments on the concrete, Sarah felt a strange sense of peace. She still had the original codes in her tattoo, but without the backup they were incomplete and useless. "The archive is locked forever," she announced. "My parents' secret dies with them." Marcus's truck screeched to a halt beside her, and she jumped in just as both groups of agents began moving toward them. As they drove away, leaving the chaos behind them, Marcus looked at her with something like pride. "What happens now?" Sarah asked. "Now you get to find out who Sarah Martinez really is, without anyone else's agenda attached." She looked down at her tattoo, still 3 interlocking circles, but somehow lighter now, freed from the weight of the secret they had carried. "And my parents got their wish. The secret stays buried and you get to live your own life." For the first time in days, Sarah smiled. It was a start,